Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Eclipsed Entity. Chapter 1: The Ominous Sky. Holly Arnold stood on the rugged cliffs of the Isle of Wight, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun hung low, casting an eerie glow over the churning sea. The town of Ventnor, nestled on the island's southern coast, had always been a tranquil place, but recent events had cast a pall of unease over its picturesque beauty. The first eclipse had occurred 6 months ago, a total solar eclipse that had turned day into night in an instant. The townsfolk had gathered to witness the celestial event, marveling at the ring of fire that encircled the blackened sun. But their awe quickly turned to fear as the sky darkened further than it should have, the temperature dropping suddenly, and an oppressive silence falling over the land. When the sun finally returned, something was different. Birds no longer sang with the same vigor, and the once vibrant flowers seemed to wilt overnight. And then the disappearances began. Chapter 2: The Vanishing. The first to go was old Mrs. Pritchard, a widow who lived on the edge of town. Her neighbors found her house empty, the front door swinging open, her belongings untouched. Next was young Tommy Dawson, a boy with a mischievous grin who never returned from his afternoon play in the woods. The town was gripped by fear, families locking their doors and windows at dusk, whispering of a curse brought on by the eclipse. Holly, a local historian, had always been skeptical of superstitions. She believed in the rationality of history and the facts it presented. But as the disappearances continued, she found herself drawn into the mystery. Armed with her notebook and a growing sense of dread, she began to investigate. Chapter 3: The Journal. In the dusty archives of the Ventnor Historical Society, Holly stumbled upon an old leather-bound journal. The faded inscription on the first page read, "Property of Nathaniel Blackwood, 1823." She carefully opened it, her heart pounding as she read the entries within. Nathaniel Blackwood had been a scholar obsessed with celestial phenomena. His journal detailed a series of solar eclipses that had plagued Ventnor nearly 2 centuries ago. Each eclipse had been accompanied by strange occurrences: crops failing, livestock vanishing, and people disappearing without a trace. Nathaniel had become convinced that an otherworldly entity was responsible, a being that thrived in the darkness of the eclipses. The Eclipsed Entity, he called it, describing it as a shadow that moved with the eclipses, growing stronger with each one, seeking to consume the town in eternal night. Holly's blood ran cold as she read the final, frantic entry. The entity is real. It seeks to return. It must be stopped. Chapter 4: The Investigation. Determined to uncover the truth, Holly enlisted the help of her friend, Mark, a local astronomer. Together, they pored over historical records, astronomical charts, and Nathaniel's journal. They discovered a pattern. The eclipses occurred in cycles, approximately every 200 years. The next eclipse was due in a week. As the day of the eclipse approached, Holly and Mark noticed an increase in strange phenomena. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord, whispers echoed in the wind, and an overwhelming sense of dread settled over Ventnor. Holly's dreams were plagued by visions of a dark, amorphous figure reaching out to her, its presence suffocating and malevolent. Chapter 5: The Ritual. Nathaniel's journal hinted at a ritual that could banish the entity, a ceremony involving ancient symbols and incantations. Desperate, Holly and Mark gathered the necessary materials: candles, chalk, and a silver dagger. On the eve of the eclipse, they made their way to the old stone circle on the cliffs, a place steeped in ancient power. As the moon began to obscure the sun, Holly and Mark hastily drew the symbols on the ground, chanting the incantations inscribed in the journal. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. The sun vanished entirely, plunging the world into an unnatural night. Chapter 6: The Entity. From the darkness, the entity emerged, a towering figure of swirling shadows, its form shifting and writhing. It moved toward them with a sinister grace, its presence oppressive and suffocating. Holly felt an icy hand grip her heart as she stood her ground, holding the silver dagger aloft. "By the light of the sun, a banshee," she cried, her voice trembling but resolute. The entity paused, a sound like a guttural laugh echoing through the air. It reached out, tendrils of darkness coiling around Holly and Mark, pulling them into its cold embrace. Chapter 7: The Sacrifice. Holly felt the darkness closing in, her vision blurring. With the last of her strength, she plunged the silver dagger into the ground at the center of the stone circle. A blinding light erupted from the earth, searing through the shadows, illuminating the stone circle with a brilliant glow. The entity shrieked, its form dissolving in the light. Holly felt the tendrils release her, the oppressive weight lifting. The sun reappeared, its warm rays dispelling the last remnants of the entity. Exhausted, Holly collapsed to the ground, Mark by her side. Chapter 8: The Aftermath. The townsfolk emerged from their homes, blinking in the returning sunlight. They found Holly and Mark at the stone circle, the symbols glowing faintly on the ground. The disappearances stopped, the strange phenomena ceased, and the town slowly began to heal. Holly knew that the entity had been banished, but she also knew that the cycle would eventually repeat. The knowledge weighed heavily on her, but she vowed to ensure that future generations would be prepared. She documented everything, adding her own entries to Nathaniel's journal, preserving the history and the means to fight the entity. As she stood once more on the cliffs of Ventnor, watching the sun set over the sea, Holly felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Eclipsed Entity had been defeated, but its shadow would always linger, and she would be ready. Chapter 9: The Research. Holly immersed herself in research, determined to uncover every detail about the entity and its connection to the eclipses. She visited neighboring towns, spoke to elders, and scoured libraries and archives across the island. Slowly, a pattern emerged, revealing that Ventnor was not the only place affected by the entity. Similar stories of darkness, disappearances, and eclipses were found in distant places, linked by the same chilling presence. The more she learned, the clearer it became that the entity was older than humanity, an ancient being from a time when darkness reigned supreme. It had been driven away by the advent of light, but sought to return through the eclipses. Holly realized the importance of documenting and sharing her findings, creating a comprehensive guide to warn and prepare future generations. Chapter 10: The Whispering Shadows. As the years passed, Holly's dedication never wavered. She founded a small group of researchers and historians who shared her passion, calling themselves the Guardians of Light. They continued to investigate, decode ancient texts, and preserve knowledge about the entity. Yet, even as they worked diligently, a sense of unease lingered. Shadows seemed to whisper to Holly, haunting her dreams and reminding her that the entity's influence had not been entirely vanquished. She often woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, feeling an unseen presence watching her. Despite these fears, she pressed on, knowing that vigilance was their only defense. Chapter 11: The Next Generation. Holly's efforts bore fruit as the Guardians of Light grew in number and influence. They educated the townsfolk, taught them the significance of the eclipses, and trained them in the rituals to ward off the entity. Ventnor became a town of watchful eyes and prepared hearts, united in their determination to keep the darkness at bay. Among the new recruits was Emily, a bright and inquisitive young woman who reminded Holly of her younger self. Emily quickly became Holly's protégée, absorbing the knowledge and passion of her mentor. Together, they strengthened the Guardians, ensuring that the legacy of vigilance would continue. Chapter 12: The Prophecy. One day, while exploring a hidden cave on the island, Emily discovered an ancient mural depicting the cycles of the eclipses and the battles against the entity. At the center of the mural was a figure holding a staff of light, surrounded by symbols of protection. Alongside the mural, inscribed in a forgotten language, was a prophecy: when the third eclipse casts its shadow, the one of light shall rise, fear knowledge and sacrifice, the darkness shall be vanquished. Holly and Emily were both awed and alarmed by the discovery. The prophecy suggested that the entity would grow stronger with each cycle, culminating in a final, decisive battle. They redoubled their efforts, preparing for the inevitable third eclipse. Chapter 13: The Gathering Storm. Years passed, and the second eclipse approached. Holly, now older and weary but resolute, stood with Emily and the Guardians on the cliffs of Ventnor. They had refined the rituals, strengthened their defenses, and fortified their spirits. As the moon began to encroach upon the sun, a familiar chill descended upon the town. Once again, the entity emerged from the darkness, more formidable than before. The Guardians, led by Holly and Emily, fought valiantly, their chants echoing through the night. The battle was fierce, but their preparations paid off. The entity was driven back, though not without cost. Several guardians were lost, their sacrifices a painful reminder of the entity's power. Chapter 14: The Final Eclipse. Holly knew that the third eclipse would be the ultimate test. She had dedicated her life to this cause, and now the endgame was approaching. She and Emily gathered the remaining guardians, their numbers bolstered by new recruits from towns across the island. They trained rigorously, perfecting the rituals and enhancing their understanding of the ancient symbols. As the date of the third eclipse drew near, an unseasonable storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering ominously over Ventnor. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable sense of foreboding. Holly and Emily, now equal leaders, stood ready, their hearts steeled for the coming darkness. Chapter 15: The Battle of Light and Shadow. On the day of the third eclipse, the town was eerily silent. The guardians took their positions, the stone circle aglow with the symbols they had inscribed. As the moon began its descent over the sun, an unnatural darkness enveloped Ventnor. The entity materialized, a monstrous form of swirling shadows, more terrifying than ever before. Holly and Emily led the guardians in the ritual, their voices rising in unison, the symbols pulsating with energy. The entity advanced, its tendrils reaching out, but the guardians held their ground. Holly, wielding the Staff of Light discovered in the cave, confronted the entity directly. The staff glowed brilliantly, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. Chapter 16: The Sacrifice. The battle raged on, the entity's power clashing with the Guardian's light. Holly felt the weight of the prophecy, the realization that her role was to make the ultimate sacrifice. With a heavy heart, she turned to Emily, her eyes filled with determination. "You are the one of light," Holly whispered. "You must lead them now." Before Emily could protest, Holly plunged the staff into the ground, releasing a surge of energy that engulfed her and the entity. The darkness shrieked, its form disintegrating in the blinding light. The eclipse ended, the sun returning to its rightful place in the sky. Chapter 17: The Dawn of a New Era. The townsfolk emerged cautiously, the fear and tension slowly dissipating as they realized the threat had passed. Emily, tears streaming down her face, held the Staff of Light, now a symbol of hope and sacrifice. Holly's legacy lived on through her and the Guardians of Light. Ventnor thrived, the memory of the Eclipsed Entity a reminder of their resilience and unity. Emily led the Guardians with wisdom and strength, continuing Holly's work and ensuring that future generations would remain vigilant. The story of Holly Arnold, the Guardians of Light, and their battle against the Eclipsed Entity became legend, a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of light over darkness. And so, the Isle of Wight remained a beacon of hope, forever prepared to face the shadows that might one day return. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.